Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of January the 4th and 5th, 2025. Now, when I've finished looking at the astrology and the I Ching for today, I'm going to consider one aspect in detail, and that aspect is the biquintile between Mercury and Mars, because there is this weekend a biquintile between Mercury and Mars, and I'm going to be considering what the biquintile means. And of course, a biquintile works the same as a quintile, so I'm actually going to be looking at this series of aspects. A biquintile is 144 degrees and a quintile is 72 degrees. And one person who does have a Mercury biquintile Mars is Elon Musk. So I'll be looking at some examples of a few famous people who have Mercury, Mars, quintiles and biquintiles. I'll also be considering a few events relating to quintiles and biquintiles. And, you know, it's a minor aspect, the quintile, the biquintile, but I think it's not an aspect that we should ignore. Anyway, before I look at quintiles and biquintiles, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching for the weekend, which is January the 4th and 5th, 2025. Usual reminder, if you enjoy the video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. Anyway, here is the picture of the weekend. I mean, here's a chart for the weekend. I've set the chart for midnight on Sunday, January the 5th, New York time. So this chart is a sort of center point of this weekend. And you can see that at midnight New York time, the moon is in Pisces. The moon is at 2150 Pisces. So, you know, for most of the weekend, this is where the moon is. So, you know, we've got our four planets in Pisces, including the moon. The Venus is now in Pisces. So it's a kind of a rather different energy from we had a few days ago. A lot of Pisces, and you know, Pisces is a fairly emotional sign. It's quite a flexible sign. It's mutable, and I suppose when you think of Pisces, you think of the ocean and going where the tide takes us, and you know, not being tied to anything particularly fixed, because you know, the tide just moves us on. Now things might change soon enough when Venus starts making a conjunction to Saturn. I mean, you could say, some would say that Venus is already making a conjunction to Saturn. I mean, it's 12.5 degrees off. That's pretty wide for a conjunction. And if you take the view that planets in a sign, two planets in the same sign are in conjunction, you could say there's already a Venus-Saturn feel to it. But I would have said that it's a bit wide, that Venus-Saturn conjunction. So I wouldn't worry about that too much at the moment. And, you know, with the moon and Venus in Pisces, I think we certainly can go with the flow. And, of course, the moon will eventually make a conjunction to Neptune. So that's the main thing going on this weekend. Now, the moon does go into Aries at 1 minute past 7 on Sunday evening London time. So if you're in the UK, if you're in Europe, Africa, then on Sunday evening at the end of a weekend, there is a change as the moon moves into Aries, and maybe some of us will feel more dynamic. There'll be perhaps a little less emotion and a little less sensitivity, and we might feel that it is time for action. Now, if you're in the Americas, the moon will go into Aries earlier on Sunday. Sort of, it could be, but if you're in California, it would be, or British Columbia, it would be at sort of 1 minute past 11 in the morning on Sunday. If you're in New York, it would be 1 minute past, let's get this right, it would be 1 minute past 1 minute past 2 in the afternoon. So it kind of depends to an extent where you are. As far as other aspects are concerned, yes, there is a biquintile between Mercury and Mars. And in other words, Mercury and Mars are actually around 144 degrees apart. And so when you've got a biquintile, what you're trying to do, I think, is you're trying to create something. You have an idea, for example, and you want to push it out. And as I think we very much see this in terms of some of the events. Some of the events are pretty unpleasant, by the way, with Mercury biquintile Mars. And you have an idea. This idea might be crazy. It might be bigoted. It might be very sensible, but there can be bigotry. We all have our own prejudices, and with Mercury biquintile Mars, some people might push those prejudices out. It's a fantasy in their heads, perhaps, and they want it to be. They want to project those prejudices outwards. I mean, that really can happen. So, what is that thing you take very seriously? It might be very idiosyncratic, but you want to push it out. You feel you can. It might be about some kind of inner vision. An inner vision might be something life affirming. It could be completely messed up. And you want to make it real, and turning words into reality, for better or for worse. That can be a way in which the Mercury-Mars biquintile works. And I do think you have to think about the process by which an idea turns into action. Ideas can, for example, you can have an idea, you can publish that idea. And actually there is some link between Mercury, Mars and publishing. Publishing often in a very unpleasant way, by the way. And you publish a prejudice, and that prejudice is acted upon. And so I'm not saying you have to run a newspaper to make most of a Mercury biquintile Mars, but it's all about how the message gets transmitted. And so that is certainly a feature of the weekend. I mean, on a sort of a more constructive note, there is a sextile between Sun and Saturn. Sun is at 15 Capricorn in the middle of a weekend. Saturn is at 15 Pisces. It's a good aspect, Sun sextile Saturn. I mean, it's maybe not exciting, but it certainly helps calm things down. And it creates a degree of stability, and it may also be about hard work, realizing that something has to be done and actually just getting on with it. And the Sun is in Capricorn. That's quite a hard-working placement. And so with Sun sextile Saturn, there's a lot we can accomplish over the course of a weekend. And another aspect we have is a Sun quintile Neptune. So Sun quintile Neptune, kind of different energy from Mercury biquintile Mars. Sun quintile Neptune maybe more about trying to create something that goes beyond ourselves. There you can see Sun, there's Neptune. They are 72 degrees apart. And so Sun quintile Neptune is about perhaps our spirituality, or wanting to find spirituality, really trying to find meaning. And it's not a natural or a spontaneous process. We're actually having to look for it, find it in ourselves, then find it in the outside world. So that could be how Sun quintile Neptune works. And there's also Mercury decile Pluto, which is a sort of a decile is 36 degrees, 1/10 of a circle. It's kind of like a quintile, but it's more of a struggle. And it sort of links with that Mercury biquintile Mars. Perhaps it's the struggle to find ways to influence. That could be a way in which the Mercury biquintile, Pluto is working. So that's the weekend from the viewpoint of New York. Just quickly setting it for Sydney, Australia. If you look at the position of planets at midnight, middle of a weekend, Sydney, Australia, the moon is still in Pisces, and I don't think there's a huge amount of difference. The only thing about the weekend from an Australasian perspective, Australia or New Zealand, is that perhaps that moon conjunct Saturn. You've got moon conjunct Saturn, you've got moon sextile the sun, and I think that it's perhaps going to be quite a useful weekend if you're in Australia or New Zealand with that moon conjunct Saturn, and you may find that you can get a lot of things done. And I think that okay. I mean, moon is conjunct Saturn earlier in the day if you're in Europe or the Americas, so you get that moon Saturn conjunction earlier in the day. But I think it may be the moon conjunct Saturn has more of a domineering force, particularly late on Saturday, early on Sunday. But I don't think there's a huge amount of difference between Australia and New Zealand and the rest of the world. So I should also look at the heliocentric picture. So let's just look at that quickly. So here is the positions of the planets from the perspective of the sun, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and we have Mercury is at 6 Scorpio. So Mercury's moved away from the square of Pluto. Remember, yesterday on Friday we had Mercury squaring Pluto. So that aspect is no longer in. Or Mars is at 21. Mars is at 21 Cancer, starting to make a square to Chiron. I think we might be picking up on that Mars heliocentric square to Chiron, and I think that with that Mars square Chiron, I think that's probably going to be at its strongest at the beginning of a week into next week. But I think with Mars square Chiron heliocentrically, there may be a certain inclination to want to do things differently, and perhaps get annoyed if we do things if we aren't able to do things differently. Plus, Mars square Chiron can perhaps be somewhat indignant if we see things going on that we feel are bad, immoral, and we might feel we want to take a stance, especially if it involves other people getting mistreated. And then Venus is making a sextile to Neptune. So Venus sextile Neptune, I would have said, it's a gentle aspect, and I think it's quite a compassionate aspect. I mean, it allows us to be imaginative, but it allows us also to care about other people, and so perhaps it actually gives another side to that Mars square Chiron. Mars square Chiron is perhaps the angry side of compassion, feeling that people are being mistreated and getting angry about it, whereas Venus sextile Neptune is the more passive side. It's about feeling that something is wrong and feeling people's pain. And so perhaps we should see Venus sextile Neptune and Mars square Chiron as related, and one being a passive understanding of what's happening, and then the other being about wanting to take action in terms of maybe doing something about it, and perhaps criticizing those who are making other people's lives miserable. So let me now consider the weekend from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of January the 4th and 5th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you quite possibly want to have a fairly quiet weekend. I mean, in theory, I think you would like a quiet weekend. I think that if you listen to your feelings, you ask yourself, where do your feelings want to go? I don't think that you feel any intrinsic natural need to do anything. And I think, Aries, that you would prefer to just enjoy your own company. I mean, that would be very nice. But I think there are going to be things that are bothering you. However much you try to isolate yourself, to, I don't know, find ways to relax, all that stuff in Pisces, it would be nice to have a pleasant walk, weather permitting, next to a body of water, that's Pisces water, but, in a very sort of quiet kind of way. And I don't know, I mean, I suppose with all that stuff, Pisces and all that stuff in Pisces, you might want to take a long bath. And obviously, baths are secluded things. I suppose when one's in the bath, one is fairly secluded. I suppose. Of course, do people have baths anymore? I suppose that the age of the bath is somewhat gone, hasn't it? But that, I think, might be how you like things to pan out. But on the other hand, we do have Mercury biquintile Mars. It might sound an obscure aspect, 144 degrees, and maybe maybe you can ignore it when you interpret a chart, but I think you should take it into consideration, particularly if it's close. And so your mind is working. There are certain things you just can't ignore, and so you might be thinking, how are you going to make an impact? How are you going to actually communicate what you think is important? And I think there are some things, Aries, you may feel just have to be publicized. I mean, maybe publicize is not necessarily the right word to use, because publicize has connotations of society and telling a wider group of people how you feel and so forth. It may just be publicization within your family, amongst your friends. Just something has to be expressed, and it should be expressed. And maybe you just worked something out. It's now clear to you. And Mercury is in Sagittarius, and it's quite a far-sighted placement. And so you're thinking, something needs to be revealed. And so there might be pressure there. And also, if we go back to the heliocentric chart, Mars is starting to make a square to Chiron. Remember, it's a heliocentric square. I don't think this square is exact over the weekend, but it will be exact early next week, Monday and Tuesday, and you're starting to feel it. And, that might be about your relationship to other people's behavior and feeling that some things are just not right, and you have to say something about it. And I don't think you're particularly afraid of your own image. If something has to be done, it has to be done. And you're not afraid of being abrupt and forcing people to just take you seriously. And you can be quite dramatic if you want to be. So it's like you would prefer to have a quiet weekend, but you may feel obliged not to have a quiet weekend. You may be obliged or feel obliged to make waves. Taurus, you're feeling, I think, at the moment, quite friendly. You will enjoy other people's company. I mean, after all, we've got the moon in Pisces, we've got Venus in Pisces. It's the weekend. I suppose it's the first weekend of the year, and with the first weekend of the year, perhaps you want to catch up with news, find out what people are doing. And so if you are socializing over the weekend, I feel confident that you can have a reasonably good time, and you won't cause too much trouble, I don't think. I think that you understand other people's sensitivities, and Venus is your ruler. Venus is kind of starting to make a conjunction to Saturn. I mean, it's a long way off, it's 12 degrees off, but I think with that conjunction over the next week or two, there is a certain sense of seriousness creeping in there, and I think you understand your responsibilities, and you understand what people can handle. And maybe particularly on Saturday, there's a conjunction between the moon and Saturn. I mean, that moon conjunct Saturn was going to be perhaps cover all of Saturday. Certainly Australia, New Zealand, it goes into the evening at around midnight, Saturday, Sunday in Australia and New Zealand, or certainly in Sydney. That moon conjunct Saturn is exact. So if you're in Australia, New Zealand, late night socializing on Saturday, if you're inclined to do that, is something that in a way could be quite serious. But wherever you are, I think that your social skills are good. I'm not saying they're spectacular, but I think you just know how to get on with people. Of course, different people behave in different ways. I mean, yesterday I talked about the Mars-Pluto opposition. Now, that Mars-Pluto opposition is slowly starting to fade, but it's still there, and Mars can be relevant to relationships. And so with Mars opposition Pluto, I think that those close to you still need to be treated with a modicum of respect, and they are still quite set in their ways, quite focused on themselves and their own interests, and they're also quite focused on issues relating to power. But I think you know this anyway, and I do think you understand the importance of respect and taking into account of other people's boundaries. Now, going back to your social life and social activities, and also in terms of ideas, it is kind of relevant because we do have a Sun sextile Saturn, and I don't know where your interests lie, but that Sun sextile Saturn could, in certain circumstances, have a political nature, because Sun is in Capricorn. I mean, the Sun in a Taurian, Sun in Capricorn in a Taurian chart can be about ideas and philosophies, principles, what you believe in, and Saturn in Pisces it is about making things fixed, establishing them. And so in certain situations, Taurus, it might be a good time to go to political meetings or talk to people about politics, and not just in a vague way. I'm not really talking about just going on and on about what you believe in and all this kind of stuff, and it's all just hot air. If there's something bothering you, then with Sun sextile Saturn, you can find other people who share the same concerns as you are. So I suppose, I'm kind of encouraging political activity if it's at all appropriate. I mean, it could be religious activity. I suppose you can get together with people, and I don't know, if you want to start a church, great time for doing it. If you want to start a political party, also a good time to be doing it, I think. But try to consider the ways in which you and the people around you might have a set of common beliefs and also a set of common concerns, which you might want do something about, because collective action might be the way forward. And in fact, that might be the challenge of Saturn in Pisces. Remember, Saturn went into Pisces at the beginning of 2023, and Taurians can be very political. They can have particular views. They can have very strong views. And maybe, perhaps with Saturn in Pisces, you're thinking about this, and you're thinking about the group, and that's perhaps what you've been kind of thinking about since the beginning of 2023. And the Sun sextile Saturn perhaps gives you a chance to actually work out what it means for Saturn to be in Pisces, and perhaps, you can get together with people if you have a chance. But even if you can't get together with other people, do think about what you believe in, whether it's political or spiritual, perhaps something else that I can't categorize right now, but do consider that. Gemini, the headline aspect in this video is a quintile between Mercury and Mars. Mercury biquintile Mars, they are 144 degrees apart, and 2/5 of a circle. And something is perhaps stirring you up, is making you annoyed, or you're feeling it's making you annoyed, and it's perhaps relates to an understanding of what's happening around you. It could be at a very local level, could to do with your family or your friends, or it could be something completely global. But it's still happening with Mercury, biquintile Mars. And I mean, I'm not saying you feel super angry. I just think you feel motivated. Geminis always have ideas, and these ideas generally they just drift, and you have these ideas one day and different set of ideas the next day. But with Mercury biquintile Mars, I think it is something that you want to something you want to talk about, and something you want to express with this Mercury biquintile Mars. And so perhaps, Gemini, you should actually think about how you can get something out into the open, how you can get people to listen, and what is the best way of communicating. And it's not just a spoken word, it could be the written word. It might be a good time to create something through your writing, whether perhaps it could be writing an email, could be writing a text message, it could be writing a book, whatever you feel is necessary, or I don't know, trying to get something published. It might be just an article, might be just a website where you contribute something and your thoughts. And that would be how Mercury Mars could manifest. And also, Mars is in Leo. It's retrograde, might be going retrograde, but that does really emphasize communication all the more with Mercury. With Mercury retrograde. I mean, I suppose Mars could work in a completely different way with Mercury Mars biquintile. I think there is actually an association. I mean, not that I know anything about it, but I think there is an association in astrology between the third house and dancing. I don't know where I got that from. Maybe that was some Vedic astrology. And Mars is in the third house from Gemini, because Gemini number 1, Cancer number 2, Leo is number 3. And so I suppose it could be an opportunity for some Geminis to dance, not me, but some Geminis, and perhaps with Mercury biquintile Mars, that might be a way to burn off some energy. But if you want to dance this weekend, it's something that has to be planned. It has to be thought about, because Mercury is biquintile. Biquintile is an aspect which is about planning. So that's that biquintile. Do try to work it through, because I think there's something that needs to be expressed, and whether it's through emails or through dancing or whatever, you need to work out whatever is appropriate for you. And at the same time, we do have a lot of planets in Pisces. And I know it's a weekend, but still, many Geminis with that Pisces emphasis are thinking about their ambitions. What would you like to do? What's important to you? What would you like to get off the ground? And what you don't want to do is just necessarily slack off because it's a weekend. No one does anything on the weekend, so why should you? There are things going on. You don't have to just drift into the sort of weekend malaise. Not necessarily at all, really. And if you've got ambitions, Gemini, then work on them. The moon is in Pisces. That's quite an ambitious sign for the moon to be in from a Gemini perspective. By the end of a weekend, by Monday, moon won't be in Pisces anymore. So perhaps you should take advantage of this, particularly when you've got moon and Venus in Pisces. I mean, the moon will be in Pisces again in a month's time. And I suppose when the moon is, I suppose if you miss moon in Pisces, moon will be in Pisces sort of 31st of January, 1st of February. And at that time, Venus will still be in Pisces. So maybe you've got another chance to enjoy having both moon and Venus in Pisces. But after that, of course, Pisces will change sign and you'll have to wait another year. So perhaps you shouldn't waste the opportunity. I think you can be very sympathetic and sensitive to other people, but also you can do it in such a way that you don't forget your own interests. And so you can perhaps, in fact, use your sensitivity to, pursue your agenda. I mean, that might not sound very nice, but I don't know what that agenda is. It could be anything. It could be something that works in everyone's best interests. But Gemini, do not forget your ambitions, even though it is the weekend. Cancer, it's a weekend where I think that overall things are going pretty well for you. You'll feel that you understand what's happening, and you'll feel at the same time quite curious. You're not going to be closed-minded. Occasionally Cancerians can be closed-minded. I mean, you have to, remember that, Cancerians do put a high premium on security, and sometimes unnecessary information can be destabilizing. Sometimes you can know too much. Sometimes you just don't want to know. That can be a Cancerian trait. I mean, not in all cases. I suppose, an example of a Cancerian who I'll be looking at later on in this video is, of course, Elon Musk. And I think that whatever you think of Elon Musk is curious. There are a few things that Elon Musk doesn't want to know about. But anyway, this weekend is, and that should be, by the way, that should be an inspiration for you. I mean, Elon Musk is a Cancerian, he's the richest man in the world. So perhaps he's a good role model, if money is important to you. But anyway, what I was saying was that you are open-minded and you're quite prepared to consider new possibilities, new ways of doing things, new ways of acting, and at the same time you can be really quite serious about it. You kind of know what's important and you're prepared to put your energy into it. And I think that when you're with other people, I think you're going to come over as being someone who is sympathetic, and you will understand people's issues, people's problems. You will get it all, and maybe you have a vision, a view of the world that actually you can articulate, and perhaps you can encourage people to sort of go beyond their everyday existence, get past their everyday concerns. So I think overall this weekend, it is a weekend when you are looking up rather than down, when you're looking at the possibilities of the future rather than worrying too much of about the past. I mean, I know Cancerians are very often concerned about the past, but I don't think it's going to overwhelm you at the and I think that you are able to sort of look forward to the possibilities of 2025. And if you are in the Americas and Europe and Africa to a lesser extent, on Sunday there is a sign change. The moon does move from Pisces into Aries. So if you're, for example, in the UK, then on Sunday evening, just 1 minute past 7 in the evening, the moon moves from Pisces into Aries. Of course, that'll be 1 minute past 8 if you're in Berlin or Paris. But it will be late morning, early afternoon if you're in the Americas. So Sunday there could be a change as the moon moves from Pisces to Aries. You might become more dynamic, and you might feel that there's something that actually needs to be done, because the moon will be making a conjunction as it moves into Aries, making a conjunction to the North Node. So moon conjunct North Node is about you feeling a certain obligation, to perhaps do something that is quite tangible, but is maybe quite sort of goal orientated. So that change is something that you should embrace, and you shouldn't maybe regard the whole weekend as just being one action. There may be two parts to the weekend, especially if you're in the Americas. Now, of course, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, I mean, don't worry about that. The moon doesn't go into Aries until tomorrow. Not just Australia and New Zealand, but East Asia, the Philippines. I mean, don't worry about the moon going into Aries this weekend. So, overall, looks like being a good weekend. Relationships should be fine. I don't see any reason why relationships shouldn't work out. There is actually a sextile between the Sun and Saturn, which may help in terms of dealing with other people. The Sun is in Capricorn, your opposite sign. It's making a sextile to Saturn. Saturn is, of course, ruler of Capricorn, which Capricorn has a special connection with relationships in the Cancerian chart. So if relationships are important, you have a chance to make the most of some of the relationships you're involved in, and perhaps you want to give someone a chance to show their worth and to perhaps indicate that they might be a stabilizing force, or you might be a stabilizing force on them. I mean, but I think that in terms of one-to-one relationships, I think that Sun sextile Saturn could make a relationship more secure. Perhaps if there have been recent problems, I mean, not serious problems perhaps, but just if there have been problems, instabilities, it might be with this Sun sextile Saturn that you can go some way, perhaps all of the way, in terms of resolving them. Leo, there is a sextile aspect between the Sun and Saturn, as I was just telling Cancer, and this Sun sextile Saturn, I think, is of relevance to you, obviously, because the Sun is your ruler, and so with Sun sextile Saturn, I think that you can really get yourself together over the weekend. I mean, with the Sun in Capricorn in general, I think in the Leo chart, it is about organization. It is about sorting yourself out. It's about recognizing that your own ego and your own desire for attention isn't everything, that sometimes you just have to stop what you're doing, deal with whatever mess has to be cleared up. I'm not saying there is a mess, but I mean that's a possibility. Just good organization, making sure everything is ship-shape, and you have the Sun sextile Saturn, which just makes you very, very motivated, and you kind of have a no-nonsense approach. So, this weekend could actually be incredibly useful. Particularly Saturday. I think the Sun sextile Saturn is probably stronger on Saturday rather than Sunday, but I think it does cover sort of both days of a weekend. So I do think that there's actually quite a lot you can accomplish, and I don't think that you need to worry too much about outside disturbances. I mean, I talked about the Mars opposition Pluto yesterday when it was exact, and I did suggest that maybe with this Mars opposition Pluto, relationships could at times be somewhat problematic. Maybe part of it is you, and you putting yourself at the center of things, and you perhaps being quite stubborn. You've got Mars in Leo, but maybe it's not going to be quite so important. And I would perhaps suggest that you perhaps de-emphasize relationships today. But you don't want a relationship taking up too much of your time, because I do think that you've got other things to do. Yet, at the same time, you have to ask, what is the function of a relationship? What is the function of other people? And perhaps that Sun sextile Saturn is actually about getting help, getting cooperation. So if there's something you're doing that's important to you and you feel you need help, you can ask for help. In fact, it might be a good test. So perhaps you're concerned about whether or not someone is a real friend, someone is trustworthy. Or perhaps if you're involved in a relationship, you may want to put your partner to the test. You ask them to help you do something. And anyone that is worth bothering with will help you. Help is available. If someone says they're too busy this weekend, then that is a true sign about who they really are, where their priorities lie. So in that sense, your desire to sort things out could have an added bonus, because by bringing other people in or trying to get other people in, you get an idea about what they're really like. So if you're listening to this and you're not a Leo and you know a Leo, and don't turn a Leo down. Don't tell a Leo you're too busy, because if you did that, then you'd be really showing your true colours, wouldn't you? So you get the picture that, Leo, it's actually quite a useful weekend, but don't forget the spiritual dimension. Yes, the Sun is sextile Saturn, but it's also quintile Neptune. And Sun quintile Neptune is a very different aspect to Sun sextile Saturn. Sun quintile Neptune is about what you're trying to create. And the Sun represents you, and it's making a quintile to Neptune. I mean, Neptune represents your desire to transcend, to be part of something larger than yourself. But it's not an easy aspect. I mean, it's not an aspect you can take for granted. You've got to do some work on it. And so, from a spiritual perspective, you're not going to feel like transcending, just like that. I mean, you're not going to be able to. Well, you might feel like transcending, but are you going to be able to transcend? I don't think so. But not straight away. But it's that feeling that you would like to transcend, and you would like to become part of something larger than yourself. And you don't normally associate transcendence with work and effort, but I think in this case you actually do. You might feel that you can become part of something else. I mean, it can be difficult. Have you ever tried to astrally travel? it's well, I don't know. I remember when I first came across a book about astral travel. It was, I don't know, I must have been about 12. It sounded fantastic. I think I read a Dennis Wheatley novel about astral travel, and I was completely fascinated by this concept that you could just lie in bed and then your soul would, or your spirit would drift off somewhere else, and you could be conscious in your spirit. And I read all these sort of occult books about how to astrally travel. And I can remember I went to a boarding school. I remember lying on my back, trying to imagine that I could move my soul somewhere else. It never worked, but that's probably because I'm a Gemini, because I think too much. But that illustrates it is difficult transcending, really difficult transcending. But at some level, I think with the Sun quintile Neptune, I think maybe you can, in a way that you find to be satisfactory. So see what you can do with that Sun quintile Neptune. It's not straightforward. It's not right there in front of you, but perhaps with effort, you can become part of something larger than yourself. Virgo. There is a lot of activity in Pisces, and of course Pisces is your opposite sign. So with all this activity in Pisces, it is going to be difficult to avoid other people. I mean, okay, you might be a hermit, that's that way you can avoid other people, but outside influences are very much there, and they can't be entirely ignored. And relationships could take up a great deal of your time. I mean, and this emphasis in Pisces is, I know that is somewhat unusual. I mean, I know you've got Saturn, and you've had Saturn in Pisces since the beginning of 2023, and Neptune in Pisces for far longer. But now you've got 4 planets in Pisces, so big emphasis there. And so I think one way or another, it's probably a good idea to consider other people's influence and not to feel that you can necessarily do things on your own. I mean, you might try to do things on your own and you might do reasonably well, but there just may be a limit to what you can actually achieve. I mean, particularly if you're ambitious this weekend, if you want this weekend to really make things happen, if you are ambitious, then without other people's help, there may be questions about how far you can actually go. Now, we do have also Mercury making a biquintile to Mars. So this biquintile to Mars, I think, could have an impact on you. And Mercury biquintile Mars, it can actually be quite an angry aspect. So Mercury kind of represents you. Biquintile Mars, what are you actually trying to create? What kind of effect are you trying to create? And it's possible that you feel that you have to say something. I mean, you don't necessarily want to say something, but you feel you have to. And if you can't say what's on your mind, then you might get rather frustrated. And so what is it you have to say? And if you do have something to say with this biquintile, biquintile can be about a bit of planning. How do you get this idea into the open? And so don't just say the first thing that comes to mind. You have to work on it. Work on creating the best impression, and the construction of the words, the way the words come together, all of that really does matter. So try your hardest to craft the message, but I think there's a message that certainly has to be delivered. But I don't want to suggest that it's going to be a difficult weekend. I mean, I think it's nice that there is an aspect between the Sun and Saturn. Sun sextile Saturn, and Sun is in Capricorn, of course, and It's always nice when Sun is in Capricorn if you're a Virgo at this time of year, and it's perhaps reminding you of, who you are and what you can do. And perhaps with Sun sextile Saturn, you may actually get some quiet appreciation from other people. It's not overt appreciation. It's not like you're going to get tons of praise, but it's quiet recognition. And when you do something that's right, when you do something that's going in the right direction, you get recognition and you get support. And because you get support, you carry on doing it. And so that represents perhaps a sort of a virtuous circle where you're doing something that's important to you. Other people recognize it. They give you the support and appreciation you need. And so you can keep working at it. And I think with that Sun sextile Saturn, you can feel just a quiet sense of satisfaction. And that would be that's something that you might really enjoy. Now we could look at the weekend in terms of that biquintile between. I've talked about that biquintile with Mars. Actually, Mercury is making another biquintile series aspect. Well, not a biquintile, it's making a decile. And a sort of a decile is half a biquintile. And so Mercury is, from a quintile biquintile perspective, is actually quite strongly highlighted. I'm going to look at this chart in greater detail at a later stage, but let me just show you another chart. I'm not showing any of the other 12 signs, this chart, by the way, so this is just for you. This is the fifth harmonic for the weekend. Now, the fifth harmonic is when you multiply every position of a planet by 5. I'll be going into details about it, a little bit more detail later in the video. But you can see how Mercury is conjunct Mars on the fifth harmonic by definition, because on the fifth harmonic, when you multiply everything by 5, a quintile becomes a conjunction. So there's your Mercury conjunct Mars, Mercury biquintile Mars. But notice how it's opposition Pluto. That's the decile. That's Mercury decile Pluto, because a decile is 5 times 2, which is 2 is an opposition, so it's an opposition on the fifth harmonic. So there is Mercury opposition Pluto and conjunct Mars. So I think that does actually give you a fair amount of power, more power than is obvious. And Mercury opposition Pluto may indicate someone, you in this case, someone who actually can be extremely persuasive. And I think that your persuasiveness is boosted by the fact that the moon is in Pisces, Venus is in Pisces. You can empathize. I mean, you have to empathize in order to persuade in most cases. And this is something very much you can do. You can get under the surface of things and really understand what is important to people. And because of that, I think over the weekend you can actually have quite a powerful but subtle influence. Libra, it's a weekend where you probably feel that there are just things you would like to do, and you don't necessarily need any help, and you're just quite happy to be yourself. And perhaps what's happening is that you're just enjoying the fact that Venus is in Pisces, and Venus is your ruler. Venus is exalted in Pisces. So with Venus in Pisces, I think that you're going to feel just a sense that you don't have to do anything, that you just want to relax, and that you want to look after yourself. And you might do this really on quite a sort of a physical level, looking after your body, looking after your mind, making sure that your environment is perfect as is possible. Of course, perfection as it is in itself is impossible, but if you want your environment to be as good as it can be, and I think that is something that can happen. And with Venus in Pisces and with the Moon in Pisces, I think that you'll feel a certain connection with water. I mean, Pisces is a water sign, so if you can be close to water, I mean, not too close to water, obviously, but if you can be close to water over the weekend, I mean, quiet water. You don't want, I'm not talking about water as in waterfalls and raging torrents. I'm talking about something quiet, gentle, peaceful, weather permitting. I mean, here it's just raining. It's been raining for weeks on and off. I mean, I suppose the rain is good, but it reaches a point where it's getting a bit tedious. So, that is one aspect of this. And also with Venus in Pisces, Moon in Pisces, I think that you'll have a sort of natural rapport with small animals. The reason I say that is because, from the Libra perspective, the Pisces is in the 6th house. Pisces is the 6th house. And in astrology, in astrology, the 6th house represents animals, small animals, smaller than a goat. So I'm not talking about your horse or your cow. I'm talking about maybe your cat or your dog or your rabbit or whatever. And so if you are a pet owner, then I think there might be sort of more of a connection between you and your dog or your cat than usual. And I suppose if you're not a pet owner, or you temporarily don't have a pet, you may feel that now is a time where you want to reconnect. Where you may, so if you feel that that it's appropriate and you want to find a new dog. I mean, I suppose obviously you shouldn't buy a new dog if you can't deal with it, but for certain Librans, that might be a good thing to do, or at least over the weekend consider whether it might be something you need, some new animal in your life. So I mean, that's a possibility. I'm not saying that is going to happen. I'm just looking at the astrology in terms of the possibilities and the potential there, and so and that does relate to the 6th house. And as far as anything else is concerned, I don't think there's a huge amount going on this weekend as far as yourself is concerned. As far as other people are concerned, well, Mars is still opposition Pluto, and Mars can represent other people, and particularly partners. And so with Mars opposition Pluto, I think certain people are still taking themselves rather seriously. And Mars is also making a biquintile to Mercury. So, don't be surprised if people have things to say. They've been trying to say something, they want to say something, and they may feel that now is their chance. And so if someone sort of delivers a stream of words, even if it's verbiage, I think you should perhaps listen to what they have to say, and perhaps you can help people to communicate. Yeah, they have got something to say. They're trying to say something, and if people can talk freely, particularly if they're close to you, then it's just going to make things a lot easier for everyone. Scorpio, the headline aspect this weekend, or at least the aspect I decided to focus on, is Mercury biquintile Mars. And of course, Mars is your ruler. So with Mercury biquintile Mars, Scorpios may feel that they do have something that needs to be said. and perhaps something is annoying you, and you feel that you need to work out the best way of saying it. I mean, just saying the first thing that comes to mind is not what it's all about. You have to think about expressing your vision. You have an idea, you have a vision, and you want to talk about it. I mean, it may not be a vision. It could be. I suppose it could be a complaint. I mean, that is absolutely possible. Mercury is in Sagittarius. It sort of has certain financial connotations to it. So I suppose some Scorpios feel that they need to make a special effort to talk about money or to work money through. I mean, Mercury is not just about talking, it's also about planning. And so with Mercury biquintile Mars, it may be a time when you want to just think about money and when you have ideas about money and just work it through. And maybe in that case, you don't actually need anyone else's help. So, I suppose to an extent it depends on the situation, but you've certainly got something to say, or you've got something to think about. I'm not saying it's necessarily about money, but it could be about money. And so if you find yourself thinking about the best way of saying something, the best way of planning something, the best way of getting something out into the open, then go with it and keep working on it, because I think that this Mercury biquintile Mars can be quite constructive, provided it's an aspect that isn't allowed to go too far. Over planning, saying too much. We also have a lot of planets in Pisces. I mean, the moon is still in Pisces, and it stays in Pisces, well, certainly until Sunday, maybe until Monday. I mean, if you're in California, moon leaves Pisces late morning, but in general, for most of the weekend, the moon is in Pisces, and you're getting used to Venus in Pisces. And I think with all of those planets in Pisces, I think Scorpio, that does make you imaginative, and you can actually perhaps do something with your imagination. It's not just about having ideas, imagining things. You can actually bring things down to earth, especially because the sun in Capricorn is sextile Saturn in Pisces. So if you've got ideas, perhaps ideas of an artistic nature, of a creative nature, then perhaps that sun sextile Saturn is going to allow you to really bring things down to earth. And Saturn has been in Pisces since the beginning of 2023, and perhaps you, at some level, Scorpio, you've been trying to make something out of your ideas. And with this sun sextile Saturn, I think that it could be very helpful. And also, I think at the moment you do actually have a certain sense of fun. I don't think it's need be a particularly serious weekend. I mean, I think that you have the capacity to enjoy yourself in a sort of very wholehearted way, and in a way that is just natural and is just in accord with you. And in order to enjoy yourself, it's just important to do things your way. It's not a weekend where I think that you have to compromise yourself or do what other people want. I think that you know what you want to do, and very often what you want to do is actually what other people want to do as well. They may not believe you at first, but perhaps, Scorpio, it's a situation where you've got everyone's interests in mind, and your interests are also other people's interests as well. I mean, it might sound a bit egotistical, but it's not meant to be egotistical. Perhaps you really do understand what's best for everyone, and if so, maybe you're right. I mean, I know that's not supposed to be encouraged, but maybe in this case, you can make decisions on other people's behalf, but provided you don't go on power trips. I mean, Scorpios always have to avoid power trips. That's not going to help. So I think it can be a fun weekend, but also a serious weekend, because things can be fun and can be serious at the same time, as every Scorpio knows. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, you don't necessarily have to do anything this weekend. I mean, I don't think that you absolutely need to assert yourself. I don't think you need to necessarily go anywhere. I mean, I'm looking at, all of the aspects this weekend. I mean, a lot of aspects this weekend. It's not much involving Jupiter. I mean, Jupiter is in Gemini still. I mean, obviously it stays in Gemini until May, but with Jupiter in Gemini, sure, it's a time when you do have to an extent, consider other people's needs. I mean, ideally, that's what you should be doing, because Jupiter in Gemini is your opposite sign. But I don't think you have to get obsessed about other people's needs. And I think that, perhaps what's important, like yesterday, Sagittarius, your own needs are what matter, and what you should be giving priority to. And I think that you really can enjoy your own space. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to be alone, but really things should be happening on your terms. And so it's not that you have to go anywhere. If anyone wants to be in touch with you, it can happen. Yeah, it can happen on your terms, at the time of your choosing, at the place of your choosing. If there is any activity, ideally it should be happening in your home, in your space, and not someone else's space, provided, of course, no one's crossing your boundaries, because boundaries are important this weekend, and boundaries have to be looked after. And boundaries can sometimes be an issue with Sagittarius. I mean, Sagittarius is always wants to go further. I mean, that's the very nature of being a Sagittarian. But you can't be boundaryless, because if you lose your boundaries, you lose everything, and you have no ego, and your ego collapses, and that's a difficult situation to be in. So you have to perhaps lay down your boundaries, and this may be a time when that's perhaps what you're doing. And you've always recognized this, certainly since the beginning of March 2023, by the way, March 2023, when Saturn went into Pisces. And so while Saturn is moving through Pisces, and Saturn, of course, goes into Aries next year, I mean, it goes back and forth into Aries this year and next. This is a time when boundaries are important, when you are sort of marking your boundaries, when you know what is yours and what is not yours, and you can make that distinction. I think you're very good at making that distinction, and so that's perhaps something that you really can do, and perhaps that's what this weekend is all about. Now, Mercury does make a biquintile to Mars, and with Mercury biquintile Mars, that aspect possibly says something about other people and how other people are behaving, and what other people are trying to do. So Mercury could represent someone who is quite close to you, who this weekend you can't avoid. And with that biquintile Mars, they've got something to say, and they've got something to communicate, and they do want to be taken seriously, and they're trying to create an effect. It may be you're dealing with a person who may not normally be particularly assertive or particularly opinionated, but this weekend they really feel that something has to be taken seriously. They feel they want to say something, and there might be a certain passion to them. I mean, the passion may be somewhat contrived. I mean, it may not be real passion, but it may not even be real urgency, but that's because they're having to make an effort. So if someone is trying to say something, Sagittarius, I think you should make some effort to listen to them and try to understand what they're trying to say. It doesn't mean to say that you have to be influenced by it, or that you have to change your plans or do anything another person's way, but just listening to someone, particularly if it's someone who deserves to be listened to, or you feel someone is important to you and they deserve a little bit of respect and attention, then yeah, give it to them. I mean, you can give them some feedback if you want, and but in general, Sagittarius, what you should be trying to do this weekend, is to create stability and find comfort for yourself. And I think this is just something you very much can do. And it's not just now. I think it's sort of between now, beginning of February, while Venus is moving through Pisces. I think it is a time when you can ground yourself. And of course, Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn. It's starting to make a conjunction to Saturn over the next week or two, and that really can bring you down to earth. And I think that is a good thing. Capricorn, there is an aspect between the Sun and Saturn this weekend. It's a sextile. And I regard this sextile between the Sun and Saturn as being entirely fortunate as far as you're concerned. I think that it gives you a strong sense of self, and it allows you to really get yourself together and to come across as a person who is very organized, who's very focused, who says what they mean. Your choice of words, I think, over the weekend is going to be very good, and I don't think anyone will be left in any doubt about what your intentions are and what you want. And you'll be helped not just by the fact that the Sun is sextile Saturn, but you've also got a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn, and that conjunction between the Moon and Saturn is especially strong on Saturday. And as a result of this aspect, I think you can get a lot of attention, but you don't get a lot of attention by being over the top, by making a lot of noise. It's just by being yourself, and people just listen to you. They understand that you've got something important to offer, and you get respect. So that is something that you really can benefit from. And I think that these aspects involving Saturn, the Moon conjunct Saturn, the Sun sextile Saturn, I think should help relationships. I think your various relationships should work well, and I think that there'll be no problems communicating. Generally getting your message across, people understanding what you want and you understanding what they want, and it's all done in a spirit of cooperation and a certain amount of seriousness. And I don't think you're going to be, this weekend, you're not going to be doing anything by accident. It's not that kind of weekend, where you just kind of see what happens, you do this because something crops up. No, I think it's a weekend where you're going to want to do things according to a plan, according to a schedule, and everything ideally should have an intention. Why are you doing it? You're doing it for this reason. You're not just doing it for the sake of it. You're doing it because it seemed like a good thing to do at the time. Now, that's not what this weekend is about, and I think that it will be very much appreciated. And if there's anything hanging over from 2024, 2024, that's right, we're in 2025. If there's anything hanging over from 24, some sort of a difficult issue that hadn't been resolved, perhaps it was something that needed to be talked about, some something financial that should have been discussed but wasn't discussed, then this weekend is actually a very good time also for tying up loose ends. So you'll know what aspects of 2024 haven't been dealt with, and I think that this weekend you can get to the bottom of things very quickly, and I think that people will listen to you. So if there's anything bothering you, just sort it out. And so in that sense, Capricorn, I think this weekend could actually be very constructive. Aquarius. Aquarius, there is a lot of activity in the sign Pisces, and like it or not, Pisces as a sign can relate to money. And I don't know what your plans are for this weekend, but don't forget the financial dimension. There may be things connected with money that just have to be addressed, and for one reason or another, financial issues may rear their head, and the way you relate to money could be important. And there are a number of ways this could work out. I mean, with Venus in Pisces, that could make you sort of financially perhaps quite fortunate. I mean, Venus is in Pisces through until the beginning of February. I mean, Venus is the lesser benefic. So, over the next month, perhaps you can use your sensitivity and your understanding of human nature to improve your financial situation. I mean, that is one way in which Venus in Pisces can work. And I suppose on the downside, Venus in Pisces, it's Pisces, it's easy come, easy go. Let's not be too upset about things. Let's just spend some money. That could be how Venus in Pisces works, which of course would not necessarily be the right way of using the energy. I mean, I suppose if we're talking about money, we want to have a fortunate outcome financially, and clearly financial responsibility does matter. I think you are going to be financially responsible, though, because Venus in Pisces is starting to make a conjunction to Saturn, and I think that that can actually make you quite self-critical. And over the weekend, you could be quite self-critical in terms of you and money, and you might be asking yourself, are you making a mistake? Have you spent too much money? Are you overcommitting? So that might be a way in which Venus in Pisces. Also, of course, the Moon is in Pisces. The Moon is going to be in Pisces, and until late on Sunday into Monday, depending on your time zone. But with the Moon in Pisces, Moon making a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces, I think Aquarius, there may be a sense of feeling a bit of financial reality there, but I think in a fortunate sense. I don't think there's any reason why you should make financial mistakes, and I think you're going to have a good understanding of money. And if money crops up over the weekend, I think you'll know how to respond. Now, another aspect taking place this weekend is a sextile between the Sun and Saturn. Now, Saturn is, of course, your ruler, and so you've got the Sun making a sextile to Saturn, and so I think Aquarius, at one level, that gives you a great sense of wholeness, feeling who you are without having to shout about it, and perhaps there's something a little bit secretive about it. Secretly you work on yourself and you get a sense of who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. But that Sun sextile Saturn might also be about relationships. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because the Sun rules Leo, and Leo's your opposite sign. So you've got the ruler of Aquarius, Saturn, making a sextile aspect to the Sun, which is ruler of the opposite sign of Leo. making that sextile between the Sun and Saturn. And I think that from a relationship perspective, that allows you to really sort things out, and do consider the various relationships in your life, whatever their nature is. And over the weekend, if you have a chance to work on these relationships, then I think you will be rewarded, and I think you can make good progress. And I think that partners will take you seriously. And I think that if there's something you want to say, something you want to express, then the other person will listen to you. And so don't be afraid of telling people how you feel. And I think that they will reciprocate. Indeed, I think in general, honesty will be reciprocated. But relationships work best this weekend away from the bright lights. So if a relationship is important to you, then don't feel that you and this other person have to go somewhere where there are lots of other people. That it wouldn't really thrive. I think that a bit of seclusion and privacy is going to be important if you want to develop relationships. I mean, I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. Any kind of relationship needs a stable environment. And a stable environment is not an environment which is full of people, full of bright lights. So hopefully you can make the most of that Sun sextile Saturn. If other people are important. Of course, we still have that Mars opposition Pluto, and so Mars opposition Pluto. I mean, I talked about it yesterday, and I said, well, you've got Mars opposition Pluto, and that could represent relationship issues. It could represent Mars in Leo could represent someone who is very stubborn, obsessively stubborn. But perhaps we have to contrast that Mars opposition Pluto with the Sun sextile Saturn. Yeah, the Mars opposition Pluto is a difficult aspect, perhaps an overly intense aspect, but the Sun sextile Saturn is more grounded. And so maybe you need to sort of work with these aspects together. And so perhaps the Sun sextile Saturn can take a situation that is a little bit intense, a little bit crazy, and can sort of bring it down to earth, and some of that intensity can be broken up. So from a relationship perspective, I think actually it can be a very good weekend. I mean, you've got some work to do there. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be completely easy, but if you want to get on with someone, or you want to improve a relationship, then I think now is a time where you really can do it. Pisces, a lot of stuff in your sign, 4 planets, and so you could say that very much puts the focus on you, and you have a lot to offer, and yeah, it just may feel that you are the center of attention. I mean, Pisces isn't always the center of attention, but I think you can be the center of attention at the moment. I mean, remember, Venus is now in Pisces. And so with Venus moving through Pisces, your social skills are very good. You know how to get on with people. You know what to say, even if they're a stranger. There's just something about you that's relaxed and easy-going, and also this weekend the moon is in Pisces as well. So moon in Pisces, it may be making a conjunction to Saturn on Saturday, but is a moon conjunct Saturn in Pisces such a big issue? I think there's something about you that is easygoing, but also you have a certain amount of gravitas, I think, especially on Saturday. You're not someone that is going to let anyone down, and I think people are going to trust you. So, do take advantage of that. If trust is required, then I think you can provide it, and people are going to regard you as being someone who is fairly responsible. Now, I mean, you might be thinking again, especially on Saturday, that you don't want to compromise yourself, you don't want to give too much away, but not really in danger of doing that. You can get on with people without revealing anything. You can just, I suppose, say the usual pleasantries, but also you're going to understand what people are thinking, what people are feeling, what people are going to want to hear, and so I think that should be pretty easy. And so do take advantage of all of this, and really try to be there for people, but in such a way where you don't have to compromise yourself. And that's it's nice that you can get that balance right. Now, one aspect we do have this weekend, which I've been talking a lot about, is a biquintile between Mercury and Mars. Now, this biquintile between Mercury and Mars can work in several different ways. I mean, one way of looking at this biquintile between Mercury and Mars is just by looking at it not in terms of you, but in terms of other people, other people's behavior. And while it's the case that you yourself are sort of relaxed and easygoing, or at least you can give the impression of being relaxed and easygoing, it may be that some people are tense, and there's something they're trying to work through. There's something they're trying to get out into the open, and so you might notice in some people a certain hesitancy. They're not entirely sure what to say. They're trying to use the right words, and you sometimes feel that someone has got perhaps more to say, but they're not saying it. And perhaps you can be encouraging. So if you feel that another person is perhaps being clumsy in terms of what they're saying, or indecisive, or they're saying somewhat more than usual, but they're not seeing it through, then perhaps you should encourage them to be more open. But that Mercury Mars could work in a different way. I mean, it may relate to your own ambitions and what you're trying to do. I mean, not just this weekend, but beyond this weekend. And it may well be that some Pisceans are trying to work something out in quite a sort of hectic kind of way. Maybe you've got a problem. I mean, not a problem in a bad sense, just a problem you're trying to solve. And this problem may relate to your ambitions or your work, your career, business, something like that. And you're trying to work it through. And it requires a lot of thought, a lot of planning, and it's not straightforward, but you feel you need time and space to work on it. And so if you do find yourself in that kind of situation where you feel you're trying to reach an answer, and you're putting a lot of energy into it, I would have said just keep going, because through your efforts and your willpower, you can actually come to a solution. I mean, at times it might be frustrating, and there might be a certain amount of anger on your part, but I think that Mercury biquintile Mars might allow you to just sort things out and turn what seems to be a rather complicated problem into something quite simple, where you actually know what needs to be done. And I suppose that might refer to what needs to be done perhaps next week. And that is it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to consider the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend of January the 4th and 5th, 2025 going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 9, and we had this 2 days ago, because we had, let's get this right, I think on Thursday I got this, the taming power of the small, and then I think Friday I had the taming power of the great, and now we're back to the taming power of the small. And so what this is saying is, it may be saying that you're dealing with something because we've had to restrict the taming power of the small 2 days ago. and if you were watching this video on 2 days ago, I mean, I think it may be part of a continuing process where you should not be putting too much energy into something, and in some ways you have to kind of tame yourself. I mean, that's what it's about, and it's not just about controlling yourself, but it may well be about controlling other people, but not controlling people in a sort of a dictatorial way. Not at all. Because it's about taming. We want everything to be as simple as possible, and we don't want to take things too far. And with the taming power of the small, it can be about small people. I mean, I don't mean small people literally, but small people, or even small people saying anything about their real personality. But right now, people who appear to be small, using too much energy. In other words, people are dealing with things they can't handle. They're not up to it. So they better calm down. They better start to tone down some of their ambitions. And so it's about taming things. And it may be taming yourself, and it could be about taming other people. And this hexagram, using the Wilhelm translation, we do get that phrase we often see in I Ching: dense clouds, no rain. It seems that there are possibilities. It seems that something is happening. There are the dense clouds. It's about to rain, but it doesn't rain. And so we shouldn't expect too much to happen. And for our part, we just need to be responsible. And we have a moving line. The moving line is the fourth line from the top. And the way we see that moving line, you can see that 5 of those moving lines are unbroken. And you've got that fourth line broken. And so that can indicate a weak person, i.e. the broken line, amongst strong people. And so that might seem a bit overwhelming if you feel yourself to be that broken line, that fourth line amongst strong people, and you might feel that there's not much you can do. But in fact, you can do quite a lot. You are going to be appreciated. And if you have a responsible approach and you're modest, then you are going to be taken seriously. And people are going to listen to you. And a key word that one should think about is perhaps being sincere. If one is sincere about what one is, who one is, and what one is trying to achieve, then I think that you'll be able to create some order. And yeah, it is about taming something. But that fourth line moves. And the fourth line moves, you can see what happens when that fourth line moves. Because when the fourth line moves, moving from a broken state to an unbroken state, then the whole emphasis of the hexagram switches, and we move to hexagram number 1, which is the creative. Now I have kind of got the wrong hexagram there. Sorry about that. Let me just switch this. So the creative, which is the first hexagram in the I Ching, all the lines are unbroken. There you go. That's a creative. So you can see, just going back, so there's the taming power of the small. Fourth line from the bottom, unbroken. But then we move to the creative, which is everything is unbroken. So this actually moves us into something really different. The creative is it is primal. It represents raw force. It's the kind of force that cannot be labeled. Because if you label something raw force, I mean, it's sometimes associated with the dragon. And so if you try to label the dragon, well, then it's not the dragon anymore. You can't label it because it's too primal to be labeled. And so there is a process of restraint and disciplines. We see this in the taming power of the small, but at a certain point it switches and we get a change of emphasis, and we realize that we're actually in a very powerful position, but it's raw power, and we can see the power around us. It is, I suppose, energy which is just waiting to manifest, to find a direction for itself. And I suppose, it's the beginning of a new year, and it's January the 5th, 4th, 5th. So we just get an idea about actually what we would like to do, what we'd want to do, and in the end, perhaps there's nothing small about it. We actually are able to tune into our creative potential. But first of all, we need to control the situation. We need to exercise some discipline. We need to be able to speak the truth. People will listen to our truth. So we stabilize things. And remember, with the taming power of the small, and perhaps this more relates to Saturday, remember, because we do have Sun sextile Saturn, we have Moon conjunct Saturn on Saturday, and that may be about the taming power of the small. And then we move to the creative, and of course on Sunday, perhaps into Monday, the Moon moves into Aries, and we move into something very different, and that's perhaps the time when we can release our dragon and really start to get into our real potential and really understand our potential. And it's now time to think about biquintiles and quintiles. So this weekend there is a biquintile between Mercury and Mars, and I just wanted to look at this aspect, which is supposed to be minor, and think about what it means. And quintiles and biquintiles, they are very much about the number 5, because a biquintile is 144 degrees, which is 2/5 of the circle, and a quintile is 1/5 of the circle. And so you can see the Mercury biquintile Mars. You see there's Mercury biquintile Mars. And, if you want to spot a biquintile, you think of the quincunx. And then you take away 6 degrees. So Mars is at 0 degrees 27 Leo. So it's quincunx 0 degrees 27 0 degrees 27 Capricorn, and then you take away 6 degrees, and you get to around. Then you get to where Mercury is, and so likewise with a quintile, it's a sextile plus 12 degrees, and so quintiles, represent a vision. We have some sort of guiding principle that we're aware of, something we want, and then we have to think about how we're going to make it happen. And so there's something we have to sort of consciously create. We have to make that effort, and so that can be how the Mercury biquintile works. And it's not just about ordinary individuals. It's about how people behave and how people feel they need to articulate their message, and that message can often be pretty unpleasant. But as we'll be seeing later, now the biquintile and the quintile, they are sort of harmonic. They are harmonic aspects. So if you want to create the 5th harmonic, so the 5th harmonic is when you see a wave through the chart. Every 72 degrees, you go round that chart in a wave of where everything which is 72 degrees apart, so is in the same place. I'm afraid I haven't really got the time to just talk about sort of harmonics in astrology. I mean, that is a different subject, and I don't think many people use harmonics in astrology, not in the way it's expressed. I know that there are other people who kind of change the name to make it kind of more user-friendly. but there is a harmonic relationship. So if we look at a fifth harmonic of the weekend, so this is multiplying every planet by 5. So if we look at the weekend from a harmonic point of view, the number 5, that Mercury quintile Mars turns up as a conjunction, because a quintile is a conjunction on the fifth harmonic by definition, and a decile, which is a 36-degree aspect, is 5 times 2, is an opposition on the fifth harmonic. And sure enough, we know that we have Mercury decile Pluto this weekend. So on the fifth harmonic chart. So remember, this chart is derived by multiplying every planet by 5, and if the resultant number is more than 360, subtracting 360 until you get under 360, that in absolute longitude, and then you convert back to longitude, but I don't want to overwhelm you with that. And then, so you have Mercury conjunct Mars opposition Pluto. So that may say something about the weekend. The message. Some people are frantic to deliver a message. And yeah, that message might not always be pleasant. So yeah, quintiles are what we're trying to create, and it can be very effective. It can be very destructive. And I just want to give you an example of a quintile transit, just to illustrate the power of a quintile. And I want to look at the chart of Adolf Hitler, and look at what was arguably the most important day in his life, potentially, in terms of my understanding of Hitler's biography. So here is Hitler's chart, and I want to focus on his Mercury. So Hitler is someone who had just lots of ideas and resentments building up, through his early life. I mean, obviously his mother died, and that really sort of obviously had a big impact on him. Having relative poverty in the Austrian town of Linz, and then the experience of the First World War, and having this nationalism, and this quite crazy nationalism, and seeing the defeat of his country. And you can think he just this build-up of resentment that he would have had. And apparently, before he got into politics, a lot of people just saw him as being crazy. I mean, he was just ranting, because he was just ranting at a time where no one appreciated what he said. And then the most important day in his life, you could argue, was September the 12th, 1919. And what happened on September the 12th, 1919, is that he was working for the German army as an agent. I think he was spying on people, and the German army wanted to. I think I've got the details vaguely right, but they wanted to know about this new party. This sort of, I think they were called the National Socialist German Workers' Party or something like that. And he went there to spy on the party. So he goes there to spy, I think, objectively. He wasn't there. He was there to be objective about it, I suppose. And I think that the subject of this meeting was someone had this idea that it would be a good idea, I think, for Bavaria to separate from Germany, maybe to become part of Austria, or to perhaps become an independent state. And so someone was talking about this at this meeting. Now, Hitler, being Hitler, didn't like this idea. He was supposed to just be sort of an objective agent where he couldn't help himself. He just stood up and started haranguing this person, started mouthing off his opinions. And straight away he was recognized. The people in charge of his party thought he was brilliant. And from then on, his political career had this constant upward trajectory until he obviously became German Chancellor and dictator. So, what was happening when at the time of this meeting. And so here's Hitler's chart in the middle, and then on the outer wheel is a chart of this meeting. I don't know exactly what time the meeting was. I mean, I've gone for 8 p.m. in Munich, but I don't know, it was in Munich. But Pluto was at 7 degrees 39 Cancer, 7 degrees 39 Cancer on that day. And Adolf Hitler's Mercury, 2540 Aries. So you can see that on the surface, Pluto is not aspecting Mercury. The moon is aspecting his Mercury. I mean, that would make sense. So that evening he had moon on his Mercury. So it was certainly a good time to communicate with having transiting moon on his Mercury. But it was more than that. It was, if you look at Pluto now, in order to spot a quintile, it's a sextile plus 12 degrees. So if you want to know the sextile point for Mercury, it's 25 Aries, and then you add 12 degrees to it. So the sextile position would be 2540 Gemini. Then you add 12 degrees to that, and you get to 740 Cancer. So Pluto was exactly quintile his Mercury with a 1 degree orb when he made the speech which arguably started his whole career. He was immediately recognized. And I suppose Pluto, you could see Pluto in Cancer, the nation, some collective force hit his Mercury. And finally, this man who had been ranting and no one was taking him seriously, he ranted in the right place, and Pluto hit his Mercury, and he was taken seriously. So I just wanted to show you that chart, not because it relates to Pluto quintile, to Mercury biquintile, quintile Mars, but just to illustrate how quintiles can work and how we shouldn't necessarily disregard them. And of course, we had a Pluto quintile, his Mercury, when we had the Moon acting as a trigger. So I just wanted to look at a few people who had Mercury quintile or biquintile Pluto in their chart. And so Alex Jones of InfoWars fame has Mercury quintile Mars. So, there is his Mercury, and there's his Mars, and you can see that Mars is approximately 72 degrees from his Mercury. So that is what he is trying to create. He has perhaps a vision of communicating, perhaps in an aggressive way, in an overly aggressive way, something angry about him. He feels he wants to be angry, and he can be angry. And so he is an example of Mercury quintile Mars. And I suppose you can talk about sort of frustrations and sort of resentments at Mercury quintile Mars. Feels that someone has to say so. Here's another example of someone who's got Mercury quintile Mars is Joseph Tiso, and he was a Catholic priest who was involved in Slovakia and in the Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia then, and he got involved with Slovak nationalism, and in the end he became leader of Slovakia as a puppet state. And of course he just couldn't help himself, perhaps, as a priest. He was supposed to be a priest, Catholic priest, looking after spiritual matters, but he couldn't help himself in terms of talking about politics and nationalism. And he had Mercury quintile Mars. And someone who recently came up, I mean, while we're on the theme of Nazism, is Chrystia Freeland's grandfather. So Chrystia Freeland was, until very recently, Canada's deputy prime minister, and her grandfather was a man called Michael Chomiak. So Michael Chomiak was a Ukrainian nationalist, and under Nazism he worked for an anti-Semitic newspaper in I think in Krakow in southern Poland, and so he was responsible for churning out anti-Semitism and extreme nationalist ideology, and so that might be how Mercury Mars could work. I mean, someone involved in journalism, pretty bad journalism, and there's Mercury, and you can see it's exact. I mean, I don't have his time of birth, but his Mercury is 72 degrees apart from his Mars. So that is what he's trying to create. He's using the newspaper to push his ideas into the open. You know, that's his vision. I mean, perhaps a very twisted vision, but he's using the newspaper and he's having an impact. And it's said that newspaper had some responsibility for the persecution intensifying the persecution of the Jews in the area. Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, has Mercury semi-sextile, Mercury quintile Mars, and so I mean, I don't know enough about him and his style to say whether that really works. I mean, if you're German, what's the style of his speaking? What kind of ideology is he trying to push? But I suppose if you want to be a politician in general, it might be useful to have Mercury quintile Mars. And another politician is RFK. RFK. I don't know whether this is the exact time. A lot of people assure me this is his exact time, so I'm sort of using it. So RFK has Mercury quintile Mars, and so with RFK, you could say, well, he's certainly got a message. There are certainly things he gets angry about, and I mean, he's angry about how he was treated by the Democratic Party. I suppose angry about what happened to his father. A lot of things he has issues with, which he feels he needs to publicize. So Mercury Mars is that anger and looking for a way to express it, and he does it. He is able to communicate, what's on his mind and what annoys him and what angers him. Russell Brand has got a huge amount to say. And Russell Brand, again, he's got stuff he's angry about. And like RFK, he's concerned about vaccines. And I think Russell Brand and RFK seem to have, as far as I can see, a fairly similar view of the world. And so here's Russell Brand's chart. So he is he was a sort of comedian who has his YouTube channel, who has always been fairly political, and there's his Mercury at 22 Gemini. Mercury has got lots to say, and it's fairly close to a quintile with Mars. So these are all quintile aspects. Now, someone who's got a biquintile aspect is Elon. So here is Elon Musk's chart. So remember, a biquintile is 144 degrees apart. But I would have said that a biquintile is going to work logically in exactly the same way as a quintile. Maybe not. I mean, at least theoretically, it should work in exactly the same way. And so Elon Musk has his Mercury at 14 Cancer, Mercury rising. So we already know, but we've got someone who's got a lot to say for himself. And there's the quintile with Mars. Now, it's not an exact quintile to Mars. I mean, Mars is, it's less than a degree apart. So, I mean, I think that's okay. By the way, in terms of orbs for quintiles and biquintiles, I would use a degree. Ideally, don't use more than a degree. I mean, keep your orbs low, because if you use high orbs like 2 degrees, 3 degrees, you're going to find just loads of quintiles, and they're going to lose its power. Now, I think in general in astrology, if you're using aspects, try to keep the orbs low. And I think with a quintile, biquintile, I wouldn't go higher than 1 degree. But so, I mean, he already has Mercury rising. Mercury, biquintile Mars, again, he's not just into making money. He has strong feelings about politics, and that seems to be perhaps a theme with the quintiles and biquintiles. He thinks a lot about society and what's going on in society, and so Elon Musk puts a lot of his energy into it and a lot of his money into it. And so Elon Musk, with his Mars biquintile Mercury, there's now a Mars quintile biquintile Mercury in the sky. And so I don't know what he's doing over the weekend, but he probably feels really motivated to to get his message across. And I want to finish with a few events that took place when Mercury was quintile or biquintile Mars. So one event is the American Civil War. So Mercury biquintile, Mercury, where's Mercury gone? There's Mars, and so Mercury was quintile Mars, and Mercury was rising, of course, like Elon has Mercury rising. So I suppose the Civil War, Mercury in Pisces, I mean, it is about ideas that have become very important. And how do you turn these ideas into something real? So I suppose from the northern states, if you're against slavery, you believe, Mercury, that slavery should be got rid of across the Union, that in the end, with the quintile Mars, what are you trying to create? In the end, you have to come to blows. It has to be a war if you've got two sides that are not going to agree. And so that might be symbolic of perhaps part of what the Civil War was about, this Mercury quintile Mars. And in terms of just an event, we had the Notre Dame fire. We just had a Notre Dame reopening, and I mean, I don't know quite how relevant this is, but that Mercury quintile Mars is exact. I've gone for 6:20 on April the 15th was when the fire started, but Mercury was exactly 72 degrees from Mars. And so it may just be just an aspect. Mars can be associated with fire, and the angle was exact. It may not be about style or vision or what one's trying to create. It just may have just been an aspect, which caused a fire. And Mercury quintile Mars, it's about trying to create something. And this is an event which is not necessarily on the surface completely Mercury Mars, is the first time that anyone deliberately took LSD, which was when Albert Hofmann, the Swiss pharmacist, he'd already taken it accidentally, but this was the first time he deliberately took LSD. So that makes sense, doesn't it? Because a quintile is a very deliberate aspect. And so, I mean, it's not a totally exact Mercury-Mars quintile, but I suppose Mars in Pisces, putting energy into something, which is a rather Piscean nature, LSD, drugs, and Mercury but it's a quintile. It's deliberately, Mercury is about curiosity. And so that might be how it worked. Now, on the same day that Albert Hofmann deliberately took LSD, something else happened, a very, very different event. And that was the start of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So don't get confused between the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. They were two different events. But the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the Jews who were in this ghetto in Warsaw. They saw the way things were going to. They saw there was no point in just hanging around waiting to be sent to the concentration camps, extermination camps. So they decided to rise up against the Nazis. And this happened with Mercury quintile Mars. So there's Mars, and there is Mercury. I mean, this is quite a close quintile. I've gone for 6 a.m. on the 19th, and so it's about people making decisions to Mercury, making the decision. We've got Mercury rising. Mercury rising, there was also Mercury rising at the start of the Civil War, of the American Civil War. You make a decision. I mean, I know that Fort Sumter was it Fort Sumter or whatever, is a bit different, but clearly Jewish leaders in the ghetto had made a decision that this was the right thing to do. Mercury and Mars, you go to arms, and that could be a way of seeing it. And it's kind of interesting that, or tragic as well, that April the 19th, 1943 was the 40th anniversary of an event taking place on April the 19th, 1903, and that was the beginning of the Kishinev pogrom. So the Kishinev pogrom was on. So Kishinev is now in Moldova. In 1903, it was part of Russia, and it was, I think it was Easter. Was that probably the Orthodox Easter? I'm not sure. When there was this attack on the Jewish population on Easter Sunday, and I think 49 were killed, others were seriously injured. And the Kishinev pogrom was, I mean, a very serious event. I mean, it is a serious event. I mean, it wasn't just the fact that people got killed; it was the fact it had a big impression on Jewish consciousness. And with the Hamas's attack on Israel on October the 7th, last 2023. I mean, I think there were parallels, not just with what was going on in the Holocaust, but with the Kishinev pogrom. It did feel like a pogrom-like event, and so it has in terms of Jewish memory, it was an incredibly important event, and people haven't forgotten. I think a lot of people still blame the Russians for the Kishinev pogrom. I mean, I don't know who was, responsible. I think there were Ukrainians involved in the Kishinev pogrom. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure who else was responsible. I don't know a great deal about it. Of course, it's now in modern day Moldova. It's not in Russia. It's not in Ukraine. But so it wasn't necessary. But it happened on Russia's patch. Russia controlled the area at the time, and the Kishinev pogrom was stirred up by the local press. And it was the local press were coming up with stories about. I mean, there'd been a Ukrainian boy who'd been killed, and the Jewish population were blamed, and another girl had been poisoned and died in a Jewish hospital, and again the Jewish community were blamed. It's the usual stuff that people used to stir up. So you have newspapers used to stir up anti-Semitism, to stir up a pogrom, and so that kind of makes sense with the fact that we do have a Mercury biquintile Mars at the time of the pogrom, when the pogrom started. And if we remember that the link with the press, that Michael Chomiak, Chrystia Freeland's grandfather, had of course been involved in a newspaper that was stirring up anti-Semitism. So there's a kind of a link there, and I suppose that is the unpleasant side of a Mercury-Mars quintile biquintile, taking an idea and using it, and perhaps distorting information, lying, in order to create acts of violence. Anyway, those are some thoughts on Mercury biquintile and quintile Mars. I hope you found that of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.